Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the STEM Space. I have another fabulous guest today that I have
Ooh,
worked with for a few years now. Erica, welcome to the STEM
thank you.
Space.
Thank you so much for having me, Natasha. I love it. This is great.
So, I'm bringing you on. You are a founder of a really awesome curriculum company, which was Nitty Gritty Science and has now done a little rebrand to NGS Magnified. But before we get into all of that, I want to hear a little bit about your story. And you were a former classroom teacher. And so, my first
hmm
question is, what's something interesting in being a teacher, some interesting experience you had that you like to share?
Ugh, with teaching since, it seems like 10 years ago, but really it's back. I started back in 2000. Like in your mind, you think it's 10 years ago when you
I
started
know.
in 2000.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just I taught in a lot of different states, and one of the favorite places I taught for 6 years was in Hawaii, and I had high schoolers with me. And one time we brought them to the continental United States for a field trip, and we were just getting off the airplane, and we had to take a bus to another stop. And on this bus ride over, we're just passing a mall in Dallas, because that's where we came through, with Dallas. And the kids were, I just heard them just getting all fired up, and I just heard cameras coming out. And I'm thinking, what are they? They've never seen them. I said, I know they have malls. What are they taking pictures of?
Right.
And I said, "What are you guys doing? What are you taking pictures of?" And they're like, "That's a squirrel. That's a squirrel. We've never seen a squirrel before." And it just took me just aback, because I was like, these kids have never seen a squirrel before, and I couldn't imagine. And it was the best thing of their whole trip. And it's just like those moments in teaching when you think, like, you take some of these things for granted of what and then when you kind of figure out what the kids know and what they're learning. This is like the part of joy of teaching that I love so much, when you just they just surprise you all the time. And they're just so innocent, and just their minds are just curious sponges. I absolutely love it.
What grades were you teaching? So this was high school. Were you a science classroom teacher? Tell us a little bit.
I started back in 2000, and my husband is an officer in the Navy, so we moved several times. So I taught in several different states, and I have a very unique perspective of teaching, because I was always able to get a science teaching job wherever we moved. And so I have taught all grades secondary. So I've taught every grade between 6th and 12th grade, and I have taught all the sciences. I've taught biology, chemistry, physical science, earth science. In Hawaii, I actually got a grant from a company, and I was able to start a marine biology program there. So
Cool.
yeah, that was super fun. So I've kind of taught the whole string of all the sciences in all the grade levels from middle to high school. So I've kind of experienced them all, and they all have different features that I love about them. So it's been super fun. And it's also helped me learn. I've also taught in different classes of finance too. So I've seen from very rich school districts to very poor school districts. I've seen school districts where I should say different administrations I've worked for. That was another thing.
Mhm.
So I've worked for a lot of different administrations, and have some respect for some very well-run administrations, and maybe some not so well-run administrations. So a lot I have seen in my education career, and that was up until about 2012. I did that. Mhm.
What is your core philosophy in science teaching? Because you've taught a bunch of different grades, a lot of different topics, and I wonder if there's a common theme in your approach to teaching science.
So the one thing that I have always pressed with my kids, I press it with the teachers I work with, is I never ever want to lose that hands-on engagement piece with the kids. I think it's very easy. There's so many digital programs now, and I know this kind of just sounds a little bit cliche, like hands-on engagement, but to me it is so important for the kids, and it is so important for them, because they have to learn to how to manipulate things, and they have to get to that point of frustration when things aren't working, or things that aren't fitting right, or they just worked really hard and then they realize everything was the wrong size that they just cut, and then it's okay to be frustrated, we have to start over, and that sort of thing. And also to make the messes and be allowed to make messes. And have that piece that they can build. And I feel like because of budgets and because of resources and because of how accessible digital is, it's just slowly slipping away. And so that is my number one thing that I think in education I'm always aware of.
And I've found, I was working with recently a school district, and they're like, it's just so much easier for just to hand worksheets, to hand a
Mhm.
textbook. And we can get kids to learn so much more content, right? With this idea of like, I lecture to you and you take notes and I've learned it. And I'm like, are they learning it, first of all?
Exactly. Exactly.
And then,
Eh.
right? And so, I mean, it's this old school thinking of kids are this empty vessel and we're just going to dump the knowledge in and all of a sudden they understand. And so I would love to hear more of your thoughts of like, why is it important for us to have experience with the science phenomenon instead of just like reading about photosynthesis, experiencing it and manipulating it and doing inquiry-based learning around it? Like, why, what would your argument be to that school district?
My thing is I think because you always have to give this argument to adults and grown-ups, right? Because if you try to convince kids, the kids would be like, heck no, I want the hands-on, I want to make the
Right.
mess, right? They're like, I don't want to learn it. And so it's trying to convince adults and grown-ups about how important this is, because to them, they have already, at this age, like they've already lost that little curiosity bubble of wonder. They just kind of think that is something that's like it's just like that's what kids do. That's not, it's just playtime or quote unquote.
Mhm.
And we're starting to miss this connection. And it's funny that you brought up phenomena, because this is exactly what I get a lot of emails about from, hey, where's your phenomenon here? Where can we find phenomena? And it's just something that I feel if somebody knew, like if you just took a classroom outside for 10 minutes, like 10 minutes, and you took a little walk, and some people argue, but we don't have nature around, or we don't have you can find it everywhere. And there you will find phenomena. You can look at anything like, why are all the flowers pointing this way? How is this plant growing up out of where all these rocks are? How is this drop of water staying here? Or, there's just all these little
Yeah.
things that can start a huge conversation. And we are not allowing these kids to make questions, and we aren't allowing them to kind of come up with the answers on their own, even if they're wrong. And everybody's finding, well, we'll just spoon feed them, just spoon feed them, just spoon feed them. And we find that a lot in social media stuff. Is one of the things that I find on social media is the kids stop asking why. They'll see something and they'll be
Mm.
like, I just saw that. Is this true? And I'll be like, did you wonder why that happens or how that happens? Because they just take for granted. So that's why there's so many fake videos that my grandma sends me all the time. Like, did you see this? I was like, Grandma, it's fake. Because people have stopped thinking like, how did that happen?
Mhm.
And they just think, well, I saw it and that's got to be real. So it's trying to convince these grown-ups and adults, like, let the kids ask questions, let
Right.
them wonder and figure it out. And by doing that, it takes a little bit more time, right? Because
Does.
yeah,
Mhm.
and that's kind of the crux in all of everything, because the other thing that grown-ups and administration want is to get more done in less time. And
Yep.
so that's the thing that's always in there, is trying to get more in less time. And it's hard. It's really hard to convince, administration and adults that way.
Well, and that's why I'm guessing this is part of the story of you founding this company and trying to develop these resources for teachers that understand this is how we should teach science
Mhm.
and maybe aren't able to find those, lessons and curriculum that would support it. So let's talk about NGS Magnified. What was the
Yeah.
launch of this organization?
Okay, so this was way back in, that's why I ended up 2011. So it all started, of course, with probably a lot of stories when they have these curriculum companies, kind of when Teachers Pay Teachers came out. And what had happened is I was actually going to take a position. I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was starting to move out of the K through 12 classroom, because I actually was finding I wanted to work with pre-service teachers, because I was finding when new science teachers were coming into our schools, they were not informed of how to be running curriculum or doing labs. And I thought, hey, I think this is somewhere I would really love to work with pre-service teachers. So I had a job lined up after my first daughter was born. And I felt like that was the field. I was ready to work with teachers. And, life does its thing and throws a 180 at you. My daughter, of course, is hospitalized. She's great now, but I was not able to go back to work and back to the classroom at that time. So I was home. And so I felt at that time, when I was home with her, taking care of her, my brain is just always on. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back to the classroom. We had to move again. So I knew I was going to go back to the middle and high school classroom. And so at that time, I was always using interactive notebooks in my classroom. And I just never finished them because you run out of time. So I thought, this is the time I'm going to make a full interactive notebook for myself right now. I'm going to get all my notes done. I'm going to get all my input and output activities done, and I'm going to have it done. So when I go back to the classroom, then it will be done, because I was always running into time, as most teachers do. And that's kind of when I also saw this Teachers Pay Teachers coming out and thought, okay, well, I'll just start putting them on Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm sure other teachers could use this as well. And then it just kind of blew up from there. And then, so then people will say, well, how do you teach these notes? So then I start making the PowerPoints, and then you start adding all the other parts of the curriculum with the assessments, and then you start adding the labs. And so that's how it started building. And that is how Nitty Gritty Science came about when we started moving on. And so throughout that time, we've done a lot of endeavors to working with other teachers and starting, I'm jumping way ahead. So we've been doing that for so long. And then COVID hit. And this was the first time teachers were coming to me and saying, hey, I need stuff for working from home, or I need this virtual lesson. And this is the first time that I really felt I was not able to help teachers, because I've never been in this situation before. I'm not, teaching online and trying to talk about running labs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the first years we started a conference called Champions for Science, where I thought, let's get all of these teachers who are doing it and are working in the classroom now, and let's just see what their ideas are. And let's bring them together. They might work for you, they might not, but let's start having the conversation. And so it's just kind of been like this kind of wave where right when I think we're going in this direction, then another opportunity presents itself. And so I'm thinking, all right, let's help teachers with this. And then we go up again, and I'm thinking, okay, we just run into another issue that teachers need help with, so let's add this in there. And so it's just kind of evolved over these years to adding a lot of different endeavors.
And that's what I love about organizations, companies like ours, because, Claire and I have a very similar story, having implemented the lessons in our own classrooms, figured out what works, and then hey, other people could use this,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But we also can easily pivot, right? I find a lot of challenges with these bigger textbook companies is they're kind of stuck in doing things one way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here what do teachers need? We can make it.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
COVID, pandemic, we started STEM space at home. Okay, we're at home. And you're how do we do a lab at home with supplies they have in their kitchen?
Yep.
And so I've just kind of loved seeing all the content you've created, and being a part of Champions for Science was so awesome because of this network of teachers that are all working together to bring up the whole field.
Yes.
And instead of every teacher reinventing it for their own classroom, we can learn from each other.
Yes.
So how has that now kind of shifted, or is there a shift with this new rebrand?
So with the rebrand, what we started doing is I had the curriculum. So we have middle school curriculum, and we've been adding to it over time. And so because of COVID, we added digital notebooks, and we've added digital things. And and I don't want to keep adding to this middle school curriculum, because then I think I will look like a big textbook company that has these fillers in here. And I don't need fillers, because I know this is the content that needs to be taught. I know I've given you labs, and I know I've given you stations, and the kids are doing the hands-on. And so we started looking and talking to other teachers and finding out where their students are struggling. And so we thought, how can we not only help students struggling in this, but also how can we kind of bring to the classroom where we can still support the standards, we can still support the units that they need to work on, but also help students just with this science mindset, with science literacy, and also try to combat what's going on. Again, I'm going to bring it back up to like social media and what's in the news and that sort of thing, and kind of helping students debunk things and figuring out what's true, what's not true. Also, it would be good if the one thing we brought in at a very nice level is how to argue professionally, how to argue
Mm.
nicely, how you can have a conversation with somebody without all the hate and all this stuff. So we started moving into that thing where we wanted to kind of focus on that small piece. So we started bringing in science debates, and we started bringing and like the debates are like going to Mars. Should we be sending people to Mars? And should we do ICE cars versus EVs and that sort of thing? And even some teachers, believe it or not, felt that that was even a little bit too risque for their class. They thought that would be too argumentative for their
Really?
students. So, okay, you know what? Then let's start easier. So we started making debates like, which is the scarier predator, right? Is it going to be the crazy fungus, or is it going to be the like the wasp, or the tarantula wasp? And
Oh,
that's
I
what,
like that.
yeah. So I think, yeah, that we did one for Halloween, and the kids had a hit with it. It was very fun to write. So we wanted to work on that piece. So we've been doing that for the last couple of years, and then also bringing in novel studies to let kids know, hey, let's bring this relevant of all the stuff we're learning in science class, and just be like, hey, if I read this fun book, it doesn't have to be boring history. It doesn't have to, well, I shouldn't say that. Science, it's not, history is not boring. History is
Maybe the way
fantastic,
it
kids.
sometimes is taught. How about that?
Yeah. Sorry, history teachers. It's not boring. But I'm just saying, I feel like a lot of science is taught just from a history perspective. That's what I'm trying to say. I feel like it's just but there is a lot of, hold on, fact, fiction, nonfiction. I always get those two. I feel like
Yeah.
there's a lot of nonfiction that can be used in the classroom and still teach a lot of relevant science concepts. So that's where we started doing novel studies and that. So that's the other thing. And now we're moving into another endeavor because we're finding a new hole. And
Ooh.
yes, this new hole is kids and outdoors.
Okay.
And so this is kind of where we're starting to focus on. And that's kind of where the conversation started coming up with NGS Magnified, because we're starting to now bring areas into focus. And so we were trying to bring science literacy into focus for a little bit. And now we're starting to bring the outdoors as a focus. And that is because I honestly see, as the years go on, and we know that there's this nature deficit disorder, that trying to get kids outside, and there's a generation that it's kind of like our age parents that is kind of a little bit younger than this, has this nature deficit disorder, and now they're starting to have kids. And if they don't go outside and the parents don't go outside, then the kids don't see them going outside. And I kind of am looking at, I feel this is how it might go, that there's going to be initiative in school soon. So there's been a lot of initiatives in school. There's been like the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. There's Red Ribbon Week. There's, it's all about let's say no to drugs. There's always these initiatives that is used in school. And I think we're starting to get back into that outdoors. We have like Earth Week and that sort of thing. But I almost think it's going to start moving into a shift where science teachers are going to start being responsible
Hmm.
teaching about nature and outside. And we have to find that way to get them outside and learn about it, because if not, if the kids don't understand what's going on, that is where you start losing that whole sustainability piece. And it's kind of that thing, we're always teaching from the classroom biology, but we never take them outside to see biology. There's
Mhm.
earth science. We teach from the classroom at the desk, and we teach about earth science from the desk. We never take them outside. So there's that connection again with phenomena that we could have just taken them outside and teach earth science, physical science. We can teach flight. We can teach force. We can teach gravity. But we don't. We do it from inside the classroom. And there's got to be a big shift. And so there's a lot of nature-based classrooms or nature-based curriculums that are trying to pop up, but you will be hard pressed to find one that's higher than 3rd grade. a full
Really?
yes, yes, they're gonna be mostly K-1, 2,
Oh,
and,
interesting. Yeah.
so it's kind of like if you go talk to the teachers, they want to take the kids outside, but it's gonna have to be a whole new mind shift because it's not you have to start thinking like if I come to the science classroom, like you bring your pen, your pencil, blah, blah, and now it's got to be the shift like, hey, it's science time. You should have your boots on, you should have your coat, like we're going outside. Like you just know you're going outside. You have classroom
Mhm.
expectations, you have outdoor expectations. Like it's just got to be
Yeah.
part of it. And it's got to be like a big shift. But we do have to start getting those kids outside. And it's not going to happen in the math classroom. It's not going to happen in language arts. It's not going to happen in history. And guess where the biggest connection can be is in the science classroom. So I think that's kind of where our new focus is going on in doing that sort of thing. So it's exciting, but we're kind of have a lot of conversations on this side where to start and what grades and that sort of thing. So it's fun, but I love it because we're doing a lot of things outside. So it's just to try to get everybody on board. It's going to be a
Mhm.
long endeavor, but we can do it.
You can do it. Yeah, and I feel like, a lot of our audience are STEM teachers, and I've
Mhm.
heard them say, like, "I try to get my kids outside, and we can do, like, solar car races or, like, the little solar oven or just observations, like having nature
Yes.
journals and, like, what do you wonder? What do you want to learn more about? Why is the sky blue? Why are the
Yep.
plants green?" Like, there's so many questions that I know my first grader ask, but by the
Yep.
time I work with, like, 3rd, 4th graders, they have stopped asking those
Mhm.
questions.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the root of what you're talking about is like keeping kids curious
Yep.
is often in the science classroom. It's the role of a science teacher is to answer those questions because science inherently is something we're all curious about.
Right. Yeah,
And that,
and it's really pretty much the best subject,
I mean, we're a little biased.
A little. But that's it. That's exactly it because the where it stops happening is uh it's like everything because we are as teachers inherently planners. And so when we think, okay, I want to plan this and I want to do this, they start planning and it just kind of grows a little bit too big in the plan because they're like, well, if I have to do this, I have to do this. Like you're saying, solar powered cars, that's outstanding, but we don't have to just go outside and run a whole big project. We don't have to make, hey, I'm going outside, so I'm going to make this huge big thing, or I have to do this. It really can be little short periods of time. Like this is our bell ringer. At this time, we meet here at the bell. This is where we go. We're going to do this for 10 minutes. We're putting this out. We'll come back tomorrow's bell ringer. We'll watch, we'll check it out. So like one, I did a a book and it was supposed to be meant for teachers and it went for parents. But if you look at my reviews, I just push it to teachers because I just but one very simple activity is you just take like a raw potato, and you cut it in half, you scoop out the whole inside of the potatoes, you drill the hole in the top, you close the potato back up. So it's just a potato trap. So the kids would just for 10 minutes go and find different areas around and we're going to bury this potato and make this potato trap. And then we'll come back tomorrow morning and let's just see what kind of things are living under the soil and in this potato trap. Something for kids to go and bury potato, boom, you're engaged already, right?
Mhm.
Already you're coming back. What do you think is going to be in your potato? They're curious. They're questioning. Where did you put your potato? Do you think you're going to get different organisms if you put your potato over here? And it already starts a discussion. You're using a potato, so we're hardly using any cost of materials, right? And then the kids are going to be you think that they're not going to meet you outside at that bell the
Yeah.
next day to go dig up their potatoes. Oh, they will be there. They're going to be on time for class. I'm telling you, to go dig up their potatoes. So, and then we just dig up our potatoes, we put them in a bucket, and then we can just kind of see. Then we're learning data collection, we're learning journaling, we're learning, drawing our diagrams, and then now we can go back into the classroom and let's tie it into soil and all that and moving the dirt. And now I might use this in my, the earth, like things that move the earth unit or something like that, and it just explain how these guys are so important, all these creatures I found in the soil. And you can just start these discussions and tie them into your units already. But I did not go and spend 45 minutes outside,
Right.
and already the kids are in the dirt, they're getting dirty, they're doing this. So it's like little activities like that we can start small, and then just get those outdoor
Mhm.
expectations and rules and stuff done out there.
And in case our audience is curious, what is the name of your book? They wanna check
Oh,
out.
Thank you. It is called Science in the Wild. See what I did there? So,
That's
you
perfect.
know, because, just trying to show, hey guys, guess what's outside? And so because I am a teacher, I wrote it as a science teacher. So I split it up by earth science, life science, and physical science. And so that's how I broke up all my all my little activities, because those are all the units we cover in like the middle school and stuff like that. And I always say, what's the science behind it and how they can, you want to take it a little bit further. That's all in there. And I really focus on using very easy to find materials. And it's something that the kids can do as a classroom, like all the activities you can just do with kids in the classroom. So science in the wild. Thanks for asking.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So one final question here is, if someone, is feeling like overwhelmed as a science teacher and they're like, I want to cover so many topics. My admin's like, you have to teach all these standards, but I want it to be exciting for my students and hands-on. How do they start? Like, how do you just get started in trying to implement what is right while also balancing all these other expectations as a teacher?
Yeah. So a lot of time when admin starts coming down and they want to see all of these different expectations and all these, check boxes down the road, and this is what you have done. I think the one thing you need to focus on is your students and what you know is best for your students. And I think one thing you need to always remember as a teacher is admin comes in, or anybody coming into your classroom is just coming in they just get a snapshot. They get a snapshot of your class, and they're seeing from this one moment. So everybody tries to, make this perfect lesson and stuff. And they can do that, for the observation. But for overall, what you want to do is sometimes less is more. You really want to focus on, when I give the students the information, we chunk this information, make sure that they master this. And we can master this by doing a very easy, like low budget lab, and follow up with something else. And then we can also do like stations, if that works for you, where you have kids rotating around, where we don't have to do something so elaborate and so over the top. And sometimes I feel that teachers come in and they feel like the lab is not going to be that great unless they do the elephant toothpaste. It must make a
Right.
mess, or it must
Explosions and
explode, right? And I have seen that. Let's just talk about that demo. Or I have seen that so many times. And I would say maybe 10% of the time I've ever seen that, do they ever get an explanation of what is
yes.
happening.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
they never teach what is happening in this to students. So there's no lesson being taught there. And so there's so many other very they're not as like wowza, but there's so many other demos or labs that make so much more of an impact for students to do, with like, how is this happening? Why is this happening? And then you can give that explanation, and students will take so much more away from that, where you don't have to do like the big show. And I think that's really important, because teachers get overwhelmed, and they just think that that's what a lab or an experiment should be. And then they just kind of get overwhelmed, and then they think, I can't do that. And then they just kind of go back to, I will just go ahead and do something more simple, like this worksheet or something. And so I think it's just, there's so many different places you can just go do science demos and stuff. And I feel like it's really important, just go and see what's out there, because there's so many that just are the kid. You will feel like a magician if you start doing like little demos and stuff for these kids and ask them why. And it's
Yeah.
just with very simple things, soda cans, tape,
Mhm.
markers, and very simple things. And you'll get the same reaction of the kids, like, oh, how did that happen, versus that. And you can start a conversation. So just be simple, and then just ask those questions and get the kids curious, and you'll get the same reaction. I think just don't have these expectations that's all people want for science, I think. And I probably answered that in a very long way.
And I would say, on the administrators listening, don't expect that science is just a
Yes.
wow factor.
Yes.
also science needs to be meaningful, and for us to teach the science for the tests that you care about, right?
Yes,
We have to be able to really help these kids think, and it's not about being wowed by a demonstration.
exactly.
Um,
Yes. Yeah,
so
let them ask the questions. See the conversation that is happening and ask the questions and watch. These students are going to be using science vocabulary in
right.
their conversations and having these discussions like little tiny scientists. It's
Mhm.
amazing. Their brains just work. Tell you,
Yeah.
they're awesome.
Well, Erica, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be sure to link NGS Magnified and your
I
book, Science
appreciate it.
in the Wild, in the show notes. But thank you for joining me today on the STEM Space.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fantastic. And I'll come back anytime. This was wonderful. So looking forward to it.
Sounds great. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.